President-elect Joe Biden announced he wants Neera Tanden to head up the Office of Management and Budget. Tanden is confirmed as director of the OMB. Senator Bernie Sanders is going to become the future chair of the Senate Budget Committee. Sanders would essentially be shepherding her nomination through that committee. So Matt Taibbi, he joins me now to talk about the message it sends to Sanders and some of his supporters, and broadly just Biden's picks in general. It's good to see you, Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Good to see you, Sagar.
Of course, man. So tell us about this. We've talked a lot about Tanden and all of that, but we haven't talked as much just about the meta message that this is sending. I wouldn't say just necessarily to Sanders supporters, but anybody kind of skeptical of the policy consensus of the last 40 years. What do you think?
I think it sends a clear message that they're not particularly interested in placating what you might call the Sanders wing of the party. They have no interest in any of the populist interpretations of politics that took over a significant portion of the party. The Tanden pick, it couldn't be more of a graphic message sent to Sanders personally and to his voters. So that, alongside some of the other nominations that have already been made, it's pretty clear what they're thinking.
Yeah, and Matt, something that we've talked a lot about here, all of us, is about around the defense sector in particular, because I think that's where it's most egregious. Where we were talking, with Biden, he's like, oh, well, he's going to have historic picks, either a black Secretary of Defense or a woman. I mean, in all cases, these are people linked directly to defense contractors and the defense contracting industry. I mean, again, what difference does that make to somebody who's going to lose their son in Afghanistan? Nothing, right?
Well, right, but the propaganda message there is pretty clear. They're just trying to preempt any criticism of any of these picks by saying, do you have a problem with women? Do you have a problem with minorities? It's smart, frankly. I mean, I totally understand the strategy. But, what they're really doing is, it's a rehash of the same strategy that Clinton Democrats have had for a while now, which is to try to disguise, sort of a lunge rightward or towards corporate donors by masking themselves in the language of social progressivism. And that's what this is all about. And they're very good at it.
So let's talk about that then. I mean, this is something I just saw happening really right now, which is that you see the way that they are able to weaponize this kind of corporate identity against people who want to do good things. I'm looking right now at Ro Khanna, who went on Laura Ingram's show in order to talk about reducing the Pentagon's budget. And he's getting attacked for it by people who work at Vox. And Ro is like, hey, man, I'm going to take any platform I can, anywhere, in order to advocate for what I think is good policy. And meanwhile, people like Tony Blinken and Michelle Flournoy and all these people get totally free passes. It's just completely insane.
Yeah, and again, that's the classic way that you use this partisan divide to evade talking about what the actual issue is, right? Ro Khanna is one of the few people who is willing to go on television and say, we spend too much money on defense, we got to cut it back. There's been a bipartisan consensus about expanding the defense budget for decades. It's clearly been a problem in both parties. And not only that, both parties have been complicit in evading spending caps on defense by putting those appropriations in other departments like Homeland Security and state. And he's talking about these issues, and there are votes to be won among conservatives. They agree with what he's saying, and there are people out there, but he's being criticized for trying to make that argument, which is crazy.
Mm-hmm. How do you see this generally playing out, Matt? You cover the Obama administration extensively. Do these people have any kind of scrap of self-reflection, under Biden? How are they going to deal with legitimate and good faith criticism around their policy and more? I mean, I like to think, Trump's election has to make you learn something, anything. But am I being too optimistic, maybe?
I think you are. I think, as your show is kind of spent a lot of time pointing out, the entire business model of the Democratic Party is to avoid dealing with its own populist concerns. Mm-hmm. And so they've never seen the Sanders wing of the party as anything but a threat to what they do for a living, which is basically take corporate money and then sell themselves as socially progressive. That's what they do for a living. That's their business. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to reform themselves because they think it might lose votes. They'd rather lose and stay in their cushy Washington sinecures and lobby jobs than win by taking a new approach that would cut out the donors.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing on the right. They don't really care about losing because when they lose, they make they make money. Honestly, they make more money whenever they're lost. That's the crazy part. The ACLU and all these people are crying thinking about the lack of donations that they're going to get now that Trump is gone. But that's a discussion, I think, for another day. Matt, thank you so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Sagar.
Absolutely. We're going to have more Rising for you right after this.